Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Jared, you ready to go?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Well, thanks everybody for joining us today for our first installment of the 2024 Economic Outlook and Policy webinar series from the Department of Agricultural, Environmental, and Development Economics. We're delighted you could join us, and we're looking forward to our speaker today. Before introducing Jared, though, let me just walk through the seminars we have upcoming. We have six of them in a series. They occur on a monthly basis. They'll be on Wednesdays at 12 o'clock, 1 hour webinars. The February 21st webinar by Dr. Sinki Lee and Ian Sheldon on grain marketing. And then we'll go to March 20th, Dr. Yao Wang. April 17th, Dr. Mark Partridge. May 15th, Dr. Alex Hollingsworth. And June 5th, Dr. Margaret Jodlowski. So we have a great series set up for the spring here. We're looking forward to it and hope that many of you can come back and join us. So without further ado, let me stop this share and turn it over to Jared to start sharing his screen. And I'll just do a quick introduction. We're delighted that Jared Grant has joined us in the Department of Agricultural, Environmental, and Development Economics. He's a relatively newcomer. He started last summer, and he came to us from the University of Georgia, where he received his PhD and MS in Agricultural and Applied Economics. Before that, he got a BS in Agribusiness from Florida A&M University. So we're delighted to have him here today. I'm not going to give a long introduction. Jared, I'll turn the floor over to you and your talk and influencers impact how trust may shape food demand. Thanks, Jared.
Thank you, Brent, for the great introduction. Happy to be here. Like Brent said, I, this is my presentation. I started my research interests are broadly in food insecurity, food accessibility, and looking at trust within the community. And one major impact is how trust may shape food demand or food choice. So today's talk, just the outline of what everything we're going to be covering. First, we're going to start off with current trends in food demand. Then the purpose of it, how does trust actually impact food demand? And then influencers, like what are their current role? How are they being used in affecting food demand? And lastly, just some policy implications of how current things done dealing with food demand or current policies with influencers. So to highlight some current trends in food demand, the USDA Economic Research Service currently reports that the food prices are expected to increase in 2024. That's a decrease actually in food at home. So grocery stores, super centers, their prices are expected to decrease, but there's an increase in food away from home, typically your restaurants, bars, things of that nature, and a bigger decrease in comparison to food at home prices. Also with online grocery shopping, how during the pandemic and after, it's been shown that there's been a huge increase in online grocery shopping or ordering groceries online and picking them up. And this is a figure showcased from the Center of Food Demand Analysis and Sustainability. And what we can see in the top chart is there's an increase in food and food away from home, which has increased over time. So food prices have definitely increased. Bigger increase in food away from home. One thing that we kind of highlight when we talk about food prices or food and demand is one main contributor in it is price. So as price increases, we expect demand to decrease. But that may not be the case in a lot of instances, such as in this case with brand name versus store or generic brand. On the left, you see brand name in blue and generic in gold, and you see a 15% discount. And on the right, you see a 30% discount for general or store prices for specific foods. And when we look at the categories, we would expect that, okay, if we're increasing the percentage decrease in food, we should expect more people to want it. But in some categories, it's not, including canned or box food, fresh meat, or fresh fruits and vegetables. So this and what's highlighted in literature is it's not just based on solely price anymore. There's other factors such as consumers are more focused on food safety or the quality of what they're eating. And this is also different based upon generations. So the bottom figure I showcases the different generations going from Boomer, Gen X, Millennial, and Gen Z to how they perceive their diet, or how they refer to it as diet well-being index. And what we see is for Boomers, they believe that they're thriving a lot more than I would say Gen Z or how showed in Gen Z. And it is showing across time that Gen Z is slowly like perceiving themselves as feeling more healthier, but we see that boomers consider their diet as better. So in this figure, we can kind of see just their thoughts by generation on specific claims of food, such as climate change will impact food prices. A lot of generations showcase that as high. But let's focus on the ones where boomers are viewing it slightly lower than other generations, such as gluten-free is healthy for you, plant-based milk is healthier for you than dairy, or genetically modified food is safe to eat. In these categories, we can see that just off generations, there's a higher percentage of millennials or Gen Z that believe that these foods are healthier. And this brings me to quality. So perceived quality, how we see that boomers may or view things differently than Gen Z or millennials. And this has strong implications when we think of information economics, where they highlight three different types of goods: search goods, experience goods, and credence goods. So search goods are kind of like an apple, where you can see an apple, you know what an apple is, and you can judge off its appearance if it's rotten or good. Experience goods is ones where you can't tell based upon how it looks, and it's based upon consumption. So like taste or texture. And the prime example is if you're eating in a restaurant and you're ordering something that you've had at other restaurants, but this is your first time having it here, you can't assume that they're equal. This could be better or worse based on the taste. And the last one is credence goods, which is ones where you can't just judge it on your own. Like you need more information or an expert. And this is claims such as, is this food organic? Or is this food healthy, cage free? And this is where an expert is kind of like needed to pretty much align with thoughts regarding like the idea of the food. So let's take this question, for example. How would consumers react to specific animal welfare regulations that affect pork prices? So in both cases, we see a price increase, but one showcases one where it just says general price increase, and the other one has specifically geared towards animal welfare, a Prop 12 price increase. And from it, we can see that there's more people that would increase spending in the Prop 12 food price than general food price because there's more information or may aligns more with how they feel or no information regarding why there's a price increase. For organic food prices, we can see an upward trend from 2001 to 2021, just showcasing the amount of sales that are increasing regarding various categories in organic food. So going with credence foods and quality and how I mentioned, in some cases, we cannot outwardly assess if this is organic. We require an expert to highlight this. This is an example of information asymmetry, or where we can't properly identify what this product is. So we have to trust an expert to give us their opinion on on things or on the product. But what's noted in this actually recent micro AEG article or paper is in due time, if an expert sees that shoppers are leaning towards them on this, they may take advantage of this and may like solely focus on profits and not really care if they're adequately guiding the shopper or consumer on their foods. Providing some more statistics on this, the big thing that consumers want is transparency, where roughly 2/3 of shoppers would actually be willing to switch brands just off gaining more information. And 80% highlight that they would like value-based information, certification, or knowledge on the allergens or products that are in the food product. And to highlight even more across generations, if like here showcases figures from 2022 to 2023, where Gen Z, millennials, Gen X, and boomers, and we can see on certain products, such as choosing generic foods over brand name, we can see Gen Z is more highly, they rate that a lot higher versus when we look at plant-based proteins, you can see Gen boomers are clearly lower than Gen Z. Specifically targeting plant-based foods, here is a figure from the Good Food Institute, which they ask questions geared towards reasons why consumers haven't tried plant-based products or reasons why consumers only tried it once or twice. For the ones that have only tried it once, we see taste as the main factor of why they would not want to try it. But regarding consumers that actually tried it once or twice, taste is still the number one. But the number two is it didn't meet their overall expectations. And this is interesting, which I'll highlight in a minute when I talk about something, the whole part of trust. So this showcases a sales metrics of purchase dynamics regarding the different types of plant-based foods in 2022. So for specifically plant-based meat, there was a 1-year decrease in growth versus in plant-based milk, there was a 9% increase. And the part that I was really interested in when highlighting this figure is the repeat rate, meaning how many times will people repeatedly purchase these products. For plant-based meat, it's 76% versus for plant-based milk, it's 76%. And for plant-based meat, it's actually a huge decrease with 63, which this highlights the purpose of our talk today, which is on trust. Will I actually purchase this stuff again, given I tried it? So I wanted to highlight a quote that a famous Nobel winner in economics, Dr. Kenneth Arrow, said, because it kind of summarizes exactly the importance of trust and how it impacts how we view transactions and how it's based upon word. Like it comes down to, can I trust that this will work? So trust is primarily based on reputation and reliability. So it's based upon open, honest communication. It's based upon things that we've experienced in the past. And that helps us figure out whether we have a positive or negative impact regarding many things, including food. So one of the common metrics that we use to analyze food is often consumer satisfaction. But consumer satisfaction is really under a realm of uncertainty, especially regarding brand types, product types, or even regarding trust in the food supply chain that we're going to get our food the same way in food safety. Public perception is definitely key when analyzing trust in certain aspects. And it always comes down to like what's very valued is first-person experiences or firsthand accounts on eating or things of that nature. As mentioned, it can be very difficult to actually quantify because trust is subjective and it can change given certain experiences. In economics, there's a concept that's associated with trust known as betrayal aversion, which means if I've been betrayed before, or if I've had a food product that made me physically sick, I'll be less likely to try that again in the future. That is the whole concept of betrayal aversion. And what this highlights is even if you offer something at a low price, consumers may question the overall quality of that item. And it can be essentially based upon something I highlighted earlier regarding expectation. So there's two different parts for expectation. There's the perceived value, which is subjective, and the actual value, which is actually experienced. So below, I have two different scenarios. The first one is where perceived value is less than actual, meaning I think this is going to be good given its price, and it actually wound up being better. Like I actually really enjoyed this. Over time, it causes trust to increase, which means it increases the repurchase power of product. Versus if I believe that this is amazing and it turns out to be less than what I expected, then that decreases trust over time. And then we're in a situation known as the market of lemons, where the famous example is with cars, where if I'm buying a car and it turns out to be bad or a lemon, then I am hurt. But what eventually happens with the market is full of lemons, and then which could eventually lead to the market failure of the whole industry. So with supply chain and how trust impacts supply chain is, in this case, there's an example of ice cream, where at the bottom we see consumers eating ice cream, the retailer sells the ice cream, processor processes it, producer makes it, and the input supplier supplies it. But what happens when there's an outbreak or a situation where the input supplier can't adequately provide producer things needed to make what's going to be ice cream or milk? If that happens, then there's issues with the processor. So the processor can't process and make the ice cream. And if ice cream isn't made, then we see problems where the retailer can't sell it and the consumer can't get it consistently. This is where I highlight trust in the supply chain. And not making this just an abstract example, this actually occurred with, for example, the Bluebell ice cream case, where in 2015, there was a outbreak of listeria where multiple people got sick and 3 people actually died. In outcome of this, they were fined over millions of dollars. And a study actually found that what aided them was their brand, where once this happened, the consumer's loyalty with the brand and the company's transparency with what was going on, such as thanking the stakeholders that have currently been a process to this, or discussing how trust actually, like discussing the ins and outs of how things are occurring, actually increased consumers' trust on the product and actually aided their adjustment or survival after the initial outbreak. Trust also impacts things when we look at the sales date of things, such as in the field for this figure, we're looking at it generationally. A lot of generations highlight the sell-by date is important to them, versus if we look at GMO or how products were produced, that is something younger generations care about more than older generations. So from this, we're going to kind of switch gears now, but I highlighted quality is a key factor, and also transparency in supply chain is good on building trust or awareness on a food product. But one thing that's very important is awareness or where the food product is, like where can consumers find it? How do consumers are aware of where your products and how they are? So that is why it's important to know, what do consumers view as trustworthy regarding advertisement? So below is some Nielsen statistics highlighting social media, television, and factors across different age ranges. And the one I want to bring a highlight to is specifically social media, where in the bottom row, we can see the dark orange highlights very trustworthy, and the light highlights very untrustworthy. For social media, we can see for younger generations below like 40 and 34, we see that there's a higher trust regarding social media than older generations, where it's below 5%. So if we want to dig deeper into this, let's look at like which sites people are actually using to get news or understand what's going on in the United States. So I primarily want to focus on the age ranges one, but we see that Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Snapchat are big regarding younger generations, versus the biggest for over 50 is Facebook, which typically makes sense. But what all of this pretty much highlights is social media is definitely dominating or shaping how younger generations are viewing. And the one factor that's important when thinking about, okay, if I'm viewing things, is the influencer. The influencer is huge on social media, or in other aspects, but primarily when people think of it, social media. But broadly, what they represent is an individual or entity that actually inspires or guides, shapes how people view a product or an initiative or things of that nature. They have direct relationship with consumers, meaning their voice can matter to people. Their followers or fans, the good thing is any product they kind of like promote is relatively inelastic to their product, meaning if the influencer highlights a product, they may believe it doesn't matter, like certain things, followers will say, oh, they're supporting it, I'm going to purchase this, I don't care about the price. In economics, this has implications regarding signal theory, meaning this could be a signal that to consumers that, okay, this product is good. Also has aspects regarding naive theory, which focuses on, in some cases, the followers may never have an actual in-person relationship with consumers, or with the influencers. So they just see them on their phone. And this can lead to bandwagon hopping on or following fads. So here is a figure that just highlights how are we being influenced? Like, how likely are we to purchase something actually if it's on, like, in this case, a streaming video? And this is, again, with generations, we see that majority feel neutral, but the ones that feel very likely or somewhat likely are younger generations compared to older generations. So what are the characteristics of influencer? Like what makes them so have such an impact or be a representation of trust? In some cases, they can be an expertise on a specific area if they want or focus. It also can be very likability or attractiveness. Like some, if I see like I like this person, I'm more likely to follow or listen to what they have to say. Trustworthiness. Trustworthiness is pretty much one of the things that I'm highlighting in this talk is how trust is such important and earned. So over time, this influencer could have a small fan base that blossomed to a big one, and some could have been across the whole journey, meaning I trust them. Goodwill. Goodwill means primarily doing things that are positive in the community or just making the world a better place. And the last one, which is probably one of the bigger ones, is similarity, meaning I can see something like this influencer or reminds me of my upbringing, or I can relate to this influencer either geographically or culturally. One aspect that's often misconstrued, like this is a profile of two different types of influencers. So celebrities are deemed as the highest tier, meaning that have mega impact, and they also have a huge number of followers. But if we look at the bottom where they highlight the engagement rate primarily focuses on, even though this may have a lot of views, are they actually like comment section? Are they actually responding? Are they actually clicking the links of products that they are promoting? So while some influencers may have higher followers, they may have low engagement versus low following influencers may have higher engagement rates, meaning if they say something, people will actually purchase them. So influencers is kind of umbrella term, and there's actually multiple types. Um, there's actually more than listed, but these are like the top three. And the one that we always think of when we think of influencers are social media ones, the ones where you see something on Instagram and they have a product. Sometimes they're a sponsored product. Usually they'll post a caption regarding it, or they'll, in some cases, the companies will give them clothes, give them away, and the influencer is just wearing it, just to, in a sense, promote the product. The other one that is interesting is the user-generated content, and that's content made by us or consumers. In a sense, it's reviews or ratings from us or employees regarding specific products. And in a sense, it's more authentic because it's us. And probably the most famous example regarding food is Coca-Cola's Share a Coke campaign, where you see people with holding a Coca-Cola can with their name saying with hashtag Share a Coke. The last one, which is probably one of the biggest ones, is content creators, where they actually create entertaining or educational or both material and post it online. And in these cases, this can be like making music or highlighting or building things and or playing video games. And if they can promote a product or highlight a product being in use. Another aspect is cooking or recipe makers. So here's some information regarding studies on influencers. So one study found that social media influencers in particular are shown to have a positive correlation regarding consumers' attitudes towards brand. But what was interesting is they said pretty much an omitted variable is pretty much trust. Like it's partially based upon the trust that influencers have towards the brand. Regarding for children in particular, intake on like healthy on snacks, kids are more likely to purchase snacks from an influencer that they support than an alternative brand that doesn't have that support. Or for example, and last one for UGCs, it's shown for specifically Gen Z females that they are more likely to impulsively purchase things given positive reviews that they see in the comments or reviews on a specific product. So like I said, influencers is kind of a broad term, and one of the more famous examples of what many might consider influencer might not is healthy eating. So in early 2010s, former former First Lady Michelle Obama created a movement or campaign geared towards combating childhood obesity and healthy eating, the Let's Move campaign. In conjunction with it, Beyonce actually reworked one of her more famous songs to Move Your Body, and it geared towards flash dancing, getting kids active, and getting them moving. And what you see here is Google searches around that time of in the red, Move Your Body, and in the black, Let's Move. And what we see is there's a huge spike in Google searches with the Move Your Body, and then a delayed spike in Let's Move. And Let's Move started before Move Your Body. So what we can see is just the impact and influence are going to have just on searches alone and encouraging healthy eating or being active. So types of food influencers, because there's multiple, and I just listed 5 here, but one is a chef or somebody that's known to cook foods and make things good. Food critics, those that judge quality of food from restaurants or specific products. Food bloggers who are similar to food critics, but highlight in a post or in a fashion, and you can read and understand that. Recipe creators, where they take ingredients from a grocery store or from a store of their choice and actually walk you through how to make some delicious, healthy dishes or dishes, period. And then the last one, which I will definitely talk about a lot more, which is interesting, is actually grocery stores can be an influencer. So here's an example of a very popular food influencer, which is Gordon Ramsay, who is very well-known chef, but has a huge presence on social media platforms, including right here is TikTok. He has over 39.9 million followers, and he makes recipes and showcases them. He also critiques sandwiches and foods. And actually, in conjunction with this, he has a frozen food line that he is exclusively collaborated on with Walmart. So this just showcases an example of how a chef can be a food influencer. Another case that I wanted to highlight is Keith Lee. Keith Lee is a former MMA fighter, and he also does food reviews and can be viewed as a food critic. And he has 15.6 followers on TikTok. And what's interesting about Keith Lee is what he's known for is giving honest food reviews on products. He goes to a city, travels around, and tries the different restaurants there. But he personally doesn't walk in. He does it anonymously. He has family or friends walk in on his behalf, get food, and then from his car or from his home, he eats and reviews them. And the power of his reviews and voice, given his followers, has led to what's been known as the Keith Lee effect in the media. For the small businesses that he frequencies or highlights, they actually see real world impacts. So there's 2 actually cases, one in Chicago and one in Houston, where prior to Keith Lee's review, they had dwindling sales. They had maybe 1 or 2 participants or customers actually coming in per day. And then after Keith Lee gave a positive review on the food quality and things like that, in 24 hours, they had lines out the door. They saw an influx of demand towards their products to the point where how in this article or photo for Pud Dairy, they were closed because they just were sold out of all their products, and it kind of aided them. I mentioned how his reviews he keeps them honest. So he keeps them, sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad, and there's no controlling regarding these are his thoughts. So for example, in Atlanta and in this New York Times article, which you can read, he visited Atlanta to do his reviews, and he actually gave some restaurants some negative reviews regarding how they conducted business, or they waited an hour and a half for food, or just the culture. And his voice resonated with a lot of people who felt the same way in Atlanta at that time, to the point where it became headlines and people were review bombing, sending threats to these restaurants. And what Keith Lee did in response to this was say, hey, these are my honest reviews and critiques. Don't review bomb these people. This showcases an act of goodwill on his behalf regarding the influencer. The last one regarding type or broad type is grocery stores that I want to highlight. So how can a grocery store be an influencer to a food product? Well, Whole Foods has this local and emergency accelerator program, or LEAP, which they recently launched in 2022, which was geared towards providing up and coming food brands an opportunity to showcase their food and highlight them for the public. Provides mentorship, education, how to maneuver things, and also place potential placement in their stores. Currently, they have two different types. They have early growth, which is net products that have never been placed in the market in the grocery store, or on the verge, which have been placed but just need a little more push. And below is just three different types of food products that were in the inaugural class. I also have linked below for anyone that wanted more information on the application process. So now broadening or switching gears, since we're in Ohio, I wanted to highlight some food influencers that have had a presence in Ohio. So in Cincinnati, there's Cincy Eats, which has 16.7 thousand followers on Instagram. And it represents two foodies that focus on just highlighting or sharing where they eat at in Cincinnati and highlighting. They highlight brunch, coffee, and just different things to look out or specials. In Cleveland, there's Stephon Johnson, who actually by trade, he is a voice actor, but he's also a Midwesterner foodie where he reviews different types of foods, different types of products. He highlights sometimes Cleveland foods, stuff you may not like, but also restaurant reviews. And he has 7.8 million followers on TikTok. In Columbus, here is Eat Play C-Bus, where they highlight different food spots, different foods, drinks, things of that nature. They highlight in different areas such as German Village and Worthington, and they have 31.7 thousand followers on Instagram. In Dayton, there's Gids, where he actually cooks meals and showcases how to make interesting or beautiful and delicious meals and give insight, where he has, and right now he has 1.3 million followers on TikTok. And the last one I wanted to highlight is Prime Hydration, which many of you may have seen in your local grocery stores or convenience stores. And they're founded by Logan Paul, who is an Ohio native, and KSI. And they were both have huge influencers. Like Logan Paul used to be a Vine star and broadened out to become, like, both have over 100,000 followers on, or 100 million followers on Instagram. And together, using their huge brands, they made a drink company where they started it in 2022. And currently, well, by the end of 2023, they were reported to have over 1.2 billion in internal sales. And what's interesting is because they know the influence they have, they decided to do this, also involve other influencers in promoting their product, and it led to their fast growth regarding these products. So now I'm going to switch gears and touch on what are the challenges of utilizing an influencer. These three are like the bigger ones. Views don't equate to sales. Just because things have a high view rate doesn't equate to sales. And that's why earlier I mentioned engagement. Engagement rates or communications or comment section replies are key in understanding that. Deceptive advertising. In some cases, some influencers may be funded by or promoted by a specific product or brand, but they don't highlight this relationship. So because of this, it's a biased opinion, or can be a biased opinion. Also, it can lead to inadequate representation of a product or trashing a product, or just pretty much just biased views. The last thing I highlighted is ever-changing nature. Even within the past 3-4 years, the changing nature of what is an influencer has just broadened out to the point where we don't know how to properly utilize it, which means it requires more like regulations, which brings up studies that highlight this, such as effective collaborations, meaning being involved with hiring an influencer, involving them, and leading to adequate sales. One paper highlighted, like I said, the need for regulation or formalized collaboration to pretty much eliminate any ambiguity. Mixed findings on whether it actually encourages healthy eating, especially regarding foods. And with user-generated content in particular, it can spread misinformation if not properly monitored, such as with fake reviews or bots. So given this, let's switch gears and talk about policy implications. Specifically, foreign influencers, they're regulated based upon the Federal Trade Commission, which requires disclosure statements for any relationship that an influencer has with brands, which is why you see sometimes you see hashtag ad or this video is sponsored. This is to showcase, hey, I'm being paid to promote this. The Consumer Review Fairness Act pretty much highlights that a consumer can leave a review and it cannot be, in a sense, removed or silenced by a food brand or product solely because it was unfavorable, unless it's false or there's criteria. And the last one to kind of eliminate food bank fake reviews such as bots, they've been proposing a rule for finding or banning actually reviewers. Like the review, like if a company has a lot of reviews or bots, finding them thousands of dollars in cases of implementation. So I'm just gonna highlight briefly some food demand side food policies that are currently been done. My Plate, which focuses on this continuation of the food pyramid, which is a visual representation of healthy food choices and just tips and resources. The the Supplemental Nutrition Incentive Grant Program, or SNAP, which is the largest food assistance program to aid food insecurity or hunger. And in conjunction with it, for some retailers, is the Gus Shoemaker Nutrition Incentive Grant Program, which offers an immediate financial incentive to encourage healthy eating, such as doubling up your SNAP bucks. And what's interesting with SNAP and GusNIP is it's the largest food assistance program in the United States, but there's still people that qualify for this and are not fully utilizing it, which has implications regarding trust. The last one, which can be viewed as a food supply policy, is placement in grocery store areas or in underserved areas. So that's where the Healthy Foods Financing Initiative, where they help aid grants and loans and placement in underserved communities. The reason why I have it as food demand is because there's been studies that's from Health Affairs that highlight how a placement in an underserved area, some consumers adopt it, meaning there's demand there, others don't, or they may not purchase healthy items here. And this has implications regarding why trust matters. So to conclude this, major takeaways from this is if perceived value is greater than actual value, you're building trust in your food product. That's the ultimate goal. For you to flourish is to have trust, and that matters. And to build trust, you need quality product, transparency, and just proper awareness of showcasing where it is for consumers to trust your product. Influencers, I've highlighted numerous examples on how they could be utilized, but the major thing is they can be a powerful tool, but more regulation or guidelines regarding how to properly utilize them or partnerships with them, and not viewing it as a one-off, more of a collaboration, because an influencer's currency is credibility and trust. If they're promoting a poor product, that not only ruins the company, but also ruins their credibility. So in a sense, a win-win is when you have someone who has a fan base or population and you have a quality product, it's win. That's why I highlight at the end, partnerships with health experts and influencers can properly build trust in a quality food product. That was the end of my presentation. Thank you for this opportunity. And are there any questions?
Jared, thanks a lot. That was fantastic. Super interesting. Let me just start my own video here so you and I can look at each other. A quick point to everybody, though, that Jared is a new assistant professor at Ohio State University, and as such, he needs to be evaluated down the road, and would really enjoy having you fill out the evaluation form on Qualtrics that I've just put into the chat feature. It's an anonymous form. We'd certainly appreciate those of you who are here today filling that out for Jared's use down the road. So please do that. We do have a couple questions, and I have a bunch of questions as well, Jared, so thanks for that. But one of the questions I thought was super interesting from an anonymous attendee about food nutritionists and whether they would fall into any of the food influencer categories. And that's and their second question there is before, how high is the trust of medical professionals on social media? So before getting to that one, though, I guess talk us through what is an influencer? Is it 500 followers, 200 followers, 25,000? I mean, you put some big numbers up there.
Definitely.
Right? So what is an influencer?
So actually in the slide that I have at the end, which I like added as an extra, was there's different actually tiers for an influencer, which there's the nano influencer, which is usually like 0 or 100,000. And if you care about their posting on Instagram, it's 10 to 100. Then there's micro level, which is anywhere from 100 to 100,000, mid tier, and then celebrities have millions. And mega is like 100, is like a million or plus. So there's different tiers regarding what is an influencer. And in some cases, how I mentioned earlier regarding engagement, if you hire a celebrity, you may get a lot of views, but the engagement of that actually clicking your product may not be impactful. Versus if you hire a nano influencer who has maybe like 10,000 followers, you may get way more than if you would have got a celebrity. And regarding
So,
health, and regarding the question regarding like our nutritionist influencers, yeah, there's a lot of influencers that focus or provide healthy foods or healthy ideas or how to cook or recipes and insight, especially with like Instagram, TikTok, and YouTubers. Do they have the same number of followers as those who are not or focus on other different things that may not be health? No, but that it depends on the credibility and the change.
yeah, that's interesting. So you're kind of identifying that an influencer is someone who's making money doing a job, basically, influencing others.
Some make get that's their sole job where they're making money promoting a product. Others, this is just providing like awareness, or they may not get money from a brand, but they may get money from, in another sense, number of followers, clicks, preventing or doing presentations like this or talking. But it's a variety of different markets that they can go into.
Yeah, that's really super interesting. Yeah, so yeah, I've always wondered that, and that helps out a lot on that as well for me. How high is trust in these medical? I was thinking about this with respect to one of your earlier slides. I'm just going to look at it myself again, but where you had those, the question was the share of consumers who somewhat or strongly agree with claims about food by generational cohorts and things like, organic food is more nutritious than non-organic food, right?
Mhm.
Gluten-free is healthier for you. So those are the kinds of questions that nutritionists would seem to be able to answer for us rather specifically, right?
Mhm.
And yet there's just a huge range of responses on here. Um, and so I guess I would say that maybe there isn't high trust of nutritionists necessarily, or maybe there is. What's your thought on that?
Medical mistrust is a definitely a huge topic in public health that they focus on. But you're right. Regarding the one thing with consumers is going with information asymmetry is there's just so much information. Like how with social media being included now compared to in past generations, you can go on your phone and learn everything you need to or learn more information. And something information may conflict. So what an influencer can represent, such as a nutritionist, is to provide a guide for this is quality and this is not. I highlighted my plate because they highlight tips and regulations. And I actually was about to pull up their Instagram follower slide, and they have like 5,000 on Instagram and even less on TikTok. But it's their presence and information. And that's why I mentioned like collaborations can further bring awareness, but also the changing nature of what is healthy and providing education on what is truly organic or the benefits and cons to like certain things such as plant-based food or animal proteins.
Yeah, it's super fascinating though to imagine that in this kind of brave new world we're in the sense that a nutritionist who would have, a degree, I presume, in nutrition, right, would have gotten at least probably an MS, maybe even or something, maybe even a
Yep.
PhD, right? And they would be out being able to give, probably really good advice on, the best foods, the healthiest foods, et cetera, et cetera. And yet they may have far less influence than an influencer who has zero training, who just sort of says something on, one of these sort of channels, right? It's
Yes.
kind of fascinating.
Yeah. It just shows where the market is going and where demand focuses on and where you get your information.
Yeah. Do we, and this is kind of, I think, to Ryan's question here on the question and answer is, what role do we have in sort of extension at the university and trying to help sort of, do we have any role to help mediate this, to help sort of ensure that when influencer messages may not be sort of scientifically correct,
Mhm.
we may have no ability to correct them in the sense that we don't have as many followers, right? But at least we can. I mean, how do we sort of help get some of that information out there that might be even uh, more correct or actually correct?
Definitely. That's a great question. And having an extension appointment and being involved, working with like a lot of what would be deemed as or what are deemed as influencers partner with like nonprofits or host events or extension and like attending like stakeholders, you see like a name. Another aspect is the concept of user generated content, like doing highlighting cases or where this is what's going on in the community. This is the current issues and highlighting information regarding the product. Another regarding specifically with health is you can, and this is a case that's been done, is it starts with kids, educating kids on what is going on regarding healthy foods geared towards gardening and things of that nature, and making it their homework. Where if you make it a homework, hey, we got to go to a farmer's market, or hey, we got to eat these food for a food diary for 2 weeks, that impacts the whole household. So now families or older generations are being exposed to it. And just it starts with just providing like collaborating more. Like if you don't have that fan base, then collaborating and talking with people that do and bridges the connection and more information comes. And Ohio State is considered like an influencer. When I was at a event with urban farming, a lot of them came because they trust the OSU brand.
Yeah, well, that's good to know. But I guess it's a bit of a two-way street though,
Yeah.
too, isn't it? That on the one hand, society needs to be open to understanding and learning about scientific information, even if it doesn't come from an influencer. But on the other hand, farmers and the people who produce our food, the industries that do that, need to be open to these messages they're getting from the community, which is, look, we want something maybe different than what we've had historically. I mean, okay, so I'm in the 50-year-old category, and I can pretty clearly see that I conceive of a lot of these issues very differently than the younger generation.
Mhm.
But it's not on the younger generation to get in line with me and the way I think about food. It's on the farmers and the food industry to get in line with the way the younger generation thinks about food. Isn't that? It's kind of a two-way street here, isn't it?
Yeah, it's both, and it depends on ultimately how I mentioned with like the market of lemons or information asymmetry is it does take a lot of work to like if someone's actually asking you questions regarding organic or GMO, and instead of taking the time to properly educate, you could focus on profit and say, oh, it's this category, like eliminate the number of buckets. And while this may be broadly true, it may not be true on their specific case. And another factor that's important that's also gaining shift is what's known as hyper personalization, where we focus on things solely for like designing a product strictly for this consumer. And that's been shown to be a shift that's going to happen very soon or happening now, but further pushed later this year.
Yeah, so more products are getting designed for a narrower group of consumers. Is that kind of what you're saying?
It's geared towards design personally like you, or if you prefer this, like these three things that you highlight more compared to someone else, designing a product solely based upon you. That is pretty much something that's been shifting towards the future, and it's called hyper personalization.
Yeah, well, that's interesting to see how that sort of
Yeah.
plays out in the marketplace. I guess in the online marketplace, there's probably opportunities for that kind of product to be delivered to people a little more easier than, say, through food grocery stores. But that can also be done in restaurants, right? You can
Yeah.
sort of hyper personalize plates for people, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, that's it's kind of that concept and trying to do it at scale, right?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Um, Another question I had is what I was surprised by with your numbers on there in particular. I was looking at that one on organics and organic sales kind of tapering off, not so much tapering off, but stabilizing, right? Not going up near as fast as they had been for about a decade or so.
Mhm.
That kind of surprised me a bit. I mean, is that a pretty, well, I assume that data seems, it's USDA data, so it's realistic. Is that,
Yeah.
are people talking about that? I mean, is that a big thing out there in the sort of food industry that sort of organic has kind of hit the ceiling now and what's next?
Um, I'm not sure specifically on each individual industry, but from what I like from the survey point of view or questions dealing with organic, I think the question is, what is organic? Like, we've heard it early, and I think it's gaining traction, but now it's okay, what is this? Is this organic? What is considered organic and not? And then is this actually going with what a credence good is? Is this actually benefiting my health? And in some cases, misinformation could highlight that it's not. Information could highlight it is. It's. I think that's what it is. Just consumers being aware of, like, if I've started eating organic in 2001 and it's 2021, do I feel better? Do I actively live better? Do I still have these issues or problems? So that could be one of the factors.
Yeah, that's interesting. Uh, but also, hasn't the USDA gone a little bit further in terms of regulating what can be called organic? And that, it's interesting. Maybe, be careful what you wish for, maybe to some extent by sort of creating what and stating specifically what a label is. It's kind of created a ceiling for this industry, right? That no longer can people sort of find an organic product that has a label that they feel good about, right? Or that they know something about, and just go with that, right? That it has to be labeled, it has to have specific things to it, and that maybe sort of signals this the in my belief, I guess, kind of the end of the growth of this industry, that is probably about stable where it is now.
Mm, that's interesting. Yeah, I did not think about that.
Yeah, who knows? It's an interesting area. I guess we'll keep watching that. I think there's a nice comment here from another. I don't know if it's the same anonymous person, but another person that see these barriers applying for things like SNAP. Even if there's trust in the system or the
Hmm.
food, other factors may keep people from utilizing available programs to purchase these healthy foods. I guess that's a realistic issue. And can
That is.
can influencers help with that? I guess have they? They probably have in some ways, I assume.
With participant, particularly SNAP.
Yeah, well, trying to help take maybe the stigma away from that for people who maybe have, I guess what the person's asking here or suggesting is that there could be some stigma or something associated with SNAP, keeping some people from using the benefit when they could have access to it. But are there influencers trying to help with that particular issue?
Currently, to my knowledge, I am unaware. The only thing that I can remember, and this was when it was back food stamps, was when an artist highlighted that was literally made millions of dollars, highlighted they were still on food stamps. That's when restriction became in place where, so that's myths and like information that caused more restrictions. But in the
Yeah.
sense of highlighting specifically, making things more aware, not to the level that's probably needed, such as hearing a specific product. And it could be just the fact of, or not on the scale of national, maybe on community or micro, or yeah.
Yeah, what do we know about the limitations on the SNAP program? It probably is less about stigma, more about where it can be used and the types of products it can be used on. That's probably a bigger limitation, I would assume, right?
Yeah, and just like the time it takes to actually like application and things of that
Yeah.
nature, or short-term food insecurity, long-term food insecurity. So there are multiple factors. And it could also, like, if you go through time, realizing, okay, I tried to do this before, road stop, I may not try to do this again and just deal with it in a different way.
Yeah. So the typical sort of government bureaucratic problems that limit people from
Oh,
engaging. Yeah. So
oh,
before we jump over to Dr. Sheldon, who's joined us here on camera, let me just remind folks in the chat feature, the link is there for um, you to go to the Qualtrics survey to answer a few questions about the presentation today. Certainly would appreciate you doing that. So, Dr. Sheldon.
I just had a quick observation based on what you were just discussing, that given that the SNAP program accounts for the largest proportion of the spending in the Farm Bill, you would think that ensuring access to this publicly supplied social program and where it's accessible would, you'd think that this would have been figured out by now. Are we getting a very good return on our investment as taxpayers if people are ill-informed about accessing the program, or just generally ill-informed about the program? And I think there's some unrealistic expectations that, I go to my local farmers market in Worthington, and there's usually a sign up saying you can use your food stamps here. sorry, your SNAP, to use the correct language. But if those SNAP, ability to purchase products are largely concentrated amongst lower income populations in the city who maybe don't have transportation ability or whatever to get to the farmers market, I think there's some sort of interesting disconnect there.
Yeah.
I mean, this is purely casual observation on my part, but no, I thought that was an interesting question you raised there, Brent, at the end about SNAP and access. So it was just a comment, not a question.
No, it's interesting because there are some focuses that are on specifically. There has been focus on, and this is just going through like discussing with other, like all my time at Georgia, spending time with undergrads, so this small population, but some college students realizing like they can use SNAP benefits because they're on their own. So that's one different group. And highlighting that and promoting it. Other aspects that are important is also just perception, like how Brent mentioned, I don't want to be perceived as poor if I accept SNAP benefits, even though I qualify. So that could be another factor. And where a trusted influencer can raise awareness is if I am on SNAP and saying, hey, I'm using SNAP benefits, then okay, then it seems okay. So that can be a further push towards going through it and highlighting the different steps and eligibility. So that's just something for policy or insight that could be useful. Okay, Ian?
Yeah, this is sort of a question based on my own previous research interests. So, Brent mentioned organic labeling, and labeling in general is considered to be one of the ways of resolving the credence good problem, right? But the credence good problem in agricultural economics is typically focused on how can consumers be sure that the product they're eating is what it claims to be, right? GMO, non-GMO, gluten-free. But if you go and look at the mainstream economics literature on credence goods, there's two asymmetric information problems. One is you go, and usually they use doctors or car mechanics as the example. So you go to a car mechanic and there's two issues, right? One, they tell you your brakes need fixing, right? So that's the diagnosis stage. And secondly, you go back and they say, I fixed your brakes. So there's two asymmetric. Translate that to the food problem, right? You've got, typically we focus on labeling, or our literature is typically focused on labeling, and we ignore the people giving the quote diagnosis, right? And it seems to me your discussion of influencers and how reputable those influencers are is a really interesting twist to the credence good problem. I mean, I'm cynical enough to believe, I don't really care what Gordon Ramsay says about food because I find him thoroughly obnoxious, and I'm embarrassed that he's a fellow British citizen to me. But so I think, just not just for your research purposes, but generally, I think thinking about the quality of information that these folks are bringing out is a really interesting twist on this credence good problem. And one that I think our profession has actually ignored. So think about gluten-free. A lot of, influencers in the acting profession, who I'm talking about, have suggested that the benefits of not eating gluten go beyond celiacs. But why should I believe what a Hollywood actress says about that as opposed to a medical expert? So I guess I'm really cynical about the role of it. I think I might start becoming an influencer if I can make that much money off doing it. Anyway, just thought I'd jump in at the end there because this is really interesting, Jared. Great presentation. Thanks a lot for doing it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, Jared, we'll give you the last word there and then we'll call it to a close.
Oh, my contact information, emails here. Just thank you for this opportunity, and feel free if there's any questions or talking or discussion, I'm available.
Yeah, thanks a ton, Jared. That was a fantastic presentation, filled with interesting information. And as you know, Jared, and as Ian was quick to observe, a massive opportunity for economic and academic research on this sort of new area where probably a lot of us are caught by surprise, right? Where we don't really understand something about this we don't understand, but we sort of see that there's some links to what we do understand. And that is really a fun area to be doing work in that could affect society. So thanks for that, Jared. Super interesting stuff. Those of you here, please do go fill out the link there. Go to the link and fill out the evaluation for Jared. That'd be super helpful for him in the long run. Also, remember, we have 5 other webinars about a month away from now. We'll have the next one with Dr. Sheldon and Sinki Lee talking about grain marketing. And so we look forward to seeing you there. Jared, thanks again, everybody. Take care.